Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. The Supreme Court on Wednesday dismissed the pleas of 5 states seeking modification of its order issued last year on the selection and appointment of Director Generals of Police. The apex court was hearing applications of various state governments including Punjab, Kerala, West Bengal, Haryana and Bihar, seeking implementation of their local laws regarding the selection and appointment of DGPs. A bench headed by Chief Justice Ranjan Gogoi said that the earlier directions of the court on selection and appointment of DGPs were issued in larger public interest and to protect the police officials from political interference. The top court on July 3rd last year passed a slew of directions on police reforms in the country and chronicled the steps of appointment of regular DGPs. It said that the states will have to send a list of senior police officers to the UPSC at least 3 months prior to the retirement of the incumbent. The commission will then prepare a panel and intimate the states, which in turn will immediately appoint one of the persons from that list. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will take a closer look at the DGP selection process. Joining me on the program today are Satya Prakash, legal editor of the Tribune, Dr. Vikram Singh, former DGP Uttar Pradesh, Sushil Chandra Tripathi, former Principal Secretary Uttar Pradesh, and P.K. Malhotra, former Secretary, Ministry of Law and Justice, Government of India. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Malhotra, I'd like to begin the program with you. How does the Supreme Court direction really impact the way DGPs are appointed now?
See, we have to look at the background in which these directions have been issued. The first time this case of Prakash Singh came before the Supreme Court, and it was decided in the year 2006. In 2006, the court was forced to give a direction because we are still governed by the Police Act of 1861. All attempts made in the past for bringing police reforms have not met with any success. There is a Model Police Act also of 2006, I think drafted by the committee headed by Mr. Soli Sorabji. Prior to that, there was a National Police Commission report also, but none of these have resulted in any reform. So these directions which were given by the Supreme Court in 2006 in Prakash Singh case was that head of the police organization, that is the DGP, because his moral and his authority reflects the mood of the people who are working under his administrative charge. So if he is not independent of the influence from the political class or from the criminal class who has got power, probably it will be difficult for the police force to discharge its duty properly. Therefore, there is a need that there should be transparency in his selection process, and not only that, once he is selected, after selection also, he should have a security of tenure, as the Government of India has given security of tenure in many other cases also.
Right.
And these are the directions given by the Supreme Court, not under any law passed by the Parliament, but in exercise of its power under the Constitution, under Article 32, under Article 142 and Article 144. Once this direction was given, this was not being followed. So in 2018, again, an application was moved on behalf of the Union government saying that many of these states are still not approaching and DGPs are being appointed on ad hoc basis. You first appoint him on ad hoc basis, he continues ad hoc basis for long number of years, then long tenure, and then you confirm it just before his retirement, confirm it, and he gets another 2 years. Thereby you have a pliable person work as a DGP. The system is being distorted.
Right.
Supreme Court gave a direction there will be no ad hocism in DGP's appointment, and the appointment should be followed by UPSC. Now, and in case there is any state law made on the subject, then the state can come to the Supreme Court and ask for a modification. Probably it is under that liberty given to the states that some of the states like Punjab, who have made certain modification in their law, they moved an application for bringing modification in the earlier direction of the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court declined to do so on the ground that present system for the time being is working well, and whatever modifications have been brought by the states, they are already under challenge before the Supreme Court.
Absolutely.
So unless a decision is taken on that, probably the present direction which has been issued by the Supreme Court needs to be worked out because it is working well. And even on behalf of the UPSC statement was made that some of the states are already following this procedure and that system is working well. And DGP's fixed tenure is giving a kind of security and a moral booster to the police authority, larger issue of police reform still remains pending.
Absolutely. And I think that is a discussion for another time, really, the larger issue of police reforms as such. Let's try and focus on the DGP issue for the time being. Mr. Tripathi, is this one step forward as far as transparency within the police force is concerned?
I would think so. We just mentioned that larger issue of police reforms has to be taken up some other day, but this is one of the measures included in police reform. Police is a uniform force and discipline is very important. The head of the police force has to have a fixed tenure and his writ must run throughout. He should have the moral authority and authority under the law and the rules and regulations to discipline his force and make the force effective, efficient and responsive to the public. What was happening was that in some cases, the political executives were finding some police officers and making them their favorites over other officers. So this was causing a lot of demoralization. And once demoralization sets in a uniform force, then it travels down the line, and at the cutting edge, the police station and district level officers who are in daily day-to-day touch with the public and looking after the crime prevention, crime detection and prosecution and also law and order activities, then their work will also suffer, because they would then look up to the political functionaries at the district level rather than their own superior officers, which they should as a uniform disciplined force. So, as was mentioned, the Prakash Singh case, the original decision was given in 2006, and thereafter all states were not following it, and they were finding some way of circumventing by making people acting DGP, and then just before the date of retirement making them DGP so that they get another 2 years, and then they are obliged to the political executive and they would do things at their behest. So, I welcome UPSC's involvement. UPSC is a constitutional body, and I am surprised why earlier UPSC was not involved. UPSC must be involved in all higher appointments, whether at state level or at central level, particularly in case of All India Service Officers. So, UPSC's involvement will insulate it from the political, political matters, and also UPSC will give a panel of names. Government still has a choice to make, but the panel should be made by UPSC, and that I think is a very fair decision which the Supreme Court has given, and it should be followed all throughout all the states in the country.
Right. Let me go across to Dr. Singh now. As a former DGP, I think it is apt, to get a view from you as to what you think about all of this.
Mr. Pereira, esteemed learned panelists Mr. Malhotra and Mr. Tripathi have very lucidly explained the nuances and the various undercurrents that go in the appointment of the DGP. You have a choice to make: convenience or competence, and this is the route to pick up the most competent man who is available. Bring a panel, and of the panel, UPSC picks up the 3 and gives it to the state government. The obstinacy with which the political bosses have defied the Supreme Court directives, 2 serving Chief Justices of India, what a national tragedy. They have said, what can we do if the state governments do not cooperate with us? Because their compulsion is that they should have a convenient DGP. The Supreme Court in the national interest has said that it should be a competent and the most competent person available. The state government then decided to circumvent the Supreme Court directives by having ad hoc appointments, and then totally nullify the directives given, the 6 directives given by the Supreme Court. This is directive number 2. Therefore, if you really want to do something in national interest, in the interest of public, then these directives are not an option any longer. They are a compulsion, and the nation should follow them, because UPSC has no vested interest. They would have no compulsion in picking out A, B or C. They will pick up the best man for the best job. And as Napoleon had said, in any organization there are those who are prepared to serve any immoral or illegal act. And the politicians' friends have a knack of zeroing in on those people who will pick out and be the most supine and perhaps pliable. The UPSC will pick up the most competent and a person who deserves to be the DGP.
Right. Let me go across to Satya Prakash now. All said and done, at the end of the day, the states are saying that police is a state subject, and why shouldn't we have a say really, or why shouldn't we appoint the DGP at the end of the day?
That's the crux of the challenge against all the states which have enacted their state laws pursuant to the Supreme Court direction and in tune with, supposedly in tune with the Model Police Act drafted by Sorabji Committee. But the real issue and the larger issue in this is that due to political interference, the police are not in a position to function in any state in a proper manner, and it called for the supreme intervention, that's the Supreme Court's intervention, to set things right. Unfortunately, in the last 12 years or more than that, all the directions issued by the Supreme Court one by one have been violated by most of the states. So far as directions regarding appointment of DGP is concerned, most of the states, around 23 or 25 states, they have violated the direction in the sense that their laws enacted by the state governments, state legislatures, they are not in tune with the Supreme Court direction, and that is why most of the laws they have been challenged. Further, on the appointment of Police Complaints Committee, none of the state has appointed Police Complaints Committee in tune with the Supreme Court direction. Same is the case with the State Security Commission, which was supposed to be functioning to insulate the police from political interference. So one by one, almost all the directions they have been violated. But at a different level, the issue is the undermining of the authority of the executive because of their own misdeeds. Because across the country, in most of the states, the political executives, they have been misusing their power so far as police force is concerned, and using the police for political or other purposes. And that is why the Supreme Court had to intervene. We have one of the finest police officers sitting in the panel. He would tell us the kind of political interference which the police force faces. That's unparalleled in the democratic world. And that is why this insulating the police force from the political class, that's important. That's the most important direction of the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, that is being violated. And it called, for the last 12 years, or more than 12 years, the Supreme Court has been monitoring implementation of its order that says how difficult it is for the Supreme Court to implement its own orders when it comes to the political class, because the political class as a whole across the country, they are opposed to it, and they are trying to stall the Supreme Court order, and most of the laws enacted by them, they are supposedly in tune with, but in fact they are trying to circumvent the Supreme Court's order one by one, and that is why one after another, almost all the laws enacted by various states, including that by Punjab, it has been challenged before the Supreme Court, and the court is dealing with second round of litigation, which is deciding on the validity of state laws.
Absolutely. I'll just come to state laws in just a bit, Mr. Malhotra, but before that, Dr. Singh, since a reference was made to you, does this really end political interference as far as the police force is concerned?
I doubt. Yes, it will be a road forward, and for the first point, I would say that in no way does it impinge upon policing being a state subject. It just smoothens the road and gives you a roadmap to make it more transparent and pick up a meritorious person. Now, to say that it will end all problems, it will, yes, insulate the DGP to a very large extent. In a scale of 1:1, I would say it will insulate him to about 60 to 65%. But 35% of maneuverability would continue to be with the political masters, in the sense that they will find insidious and very different ways of slow poisoning the system and hijacking the system.
And how do we change that?
Well, it is for a decision to be taken. I would feel that is for the DGPs who has once been selected for a security of tenure to prove that he is a man of steel and a man with a backbone. Because there is no way that the political masters can remove him in less than 2 years. Therefore, whether his head be bleeding, it should be unbowed. To that extent, I think it is for the police leadership, the UPSC, to pick out the best man, and the best man then should know that yes, he is there for exactly 365 days into 2 and not less than that. But till then he is there. He will not compromise with the basics and anything that is nefarious, illegal or immoral.
And that indeed will go a long way. Yes, Mr. Malhotra, you wanted to add something?
Frank, one thing which we have to understand is this order or the direction given by the Supreme Court is not still final. Because some of the state legislation which are dealing with this subject matter, their constitutional validity is still in challenge before the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court judgment is yet to come on that. So this is a direction which has been given in the interregnum. And I think Mr. Tripathi has also very rightly pointed out, and I think my other co-panelist, Dr. Vikram Singh, has also very rightly pointed out, that so far as the law and order is concerned, it may be a state subject. But here we are dealing with the Indian Police Service Officers, which is an All India service. And All India service fall within the domain of the Union Public Service Commission and the central government. So once you are making a selection for head of the police force in a state, and if the Union Public Service Commission, which under the Constitution is mandated to give its recommendation to the government on this, and in that committee, if you have a representative of the state government, I think nobody should have a question on that. And even right now also the procedure which is being followed is the UPSC chairman or member chairs the committee, a representative of the central government is there, a representative of the state government is there, and it's not that they are giving only one thing. They give a panel of 3 officers from the state, and the state has got the discretion to choose any one of them. So I think this is a very fair and transparent procedure which has been laid down, and if state want to go for any other procedure, there is a possibility that it may not be acceptable to the Supreme Court.
All right, Mr. Tripathi, this is something that you touched upon in your opening remark as well. Why limit the UPSC just to this? Why not broaden the scope really as far as the UPSC is concerned?
Absolutely. I am in favor of UPSC doing similar exercise, preparing a panel of 3 names to be selected by the state government for post of chief secretaries also. Because along with DGP, chief secretaries are also very important functionaries at state level. And not only that, but the principal secretaries as well. UPSC is mandated by the Constitution to look after All India services, and these are all India services positions. So UPSC should not confine itself only to making selections at the entry level of All India services, but at all levels of promotions and empanelment of officers at various levels.
Even at the center?
Even at the center and at the states. States also, DGP, additional DGP, IG, right from the level of Superintendent of Police upwards. Similarly for district magistrates, commissioners, principal secretaries, chief secretaries, and central government, additional joint secretary, additional secretary. Then the body of All India service officers, as they were intended by Sardar Patel in the All India services formulation at the time of framing of the Constitution, will really get insulated from day-to-day political pressures. They will of course be responsible and they will have accountability, but they need not be accountable to the day-to-day political issues. They are accountable to the law, accountable to the Constitution, accountable to the government. But their selections, if they are taken away from the political pressures and done by UPSC, government will still have the decision-making role as to whom to post where, but from amongst the panel of names given by UPSC. So this will insulate to a very large extent, and I think then perhaps both the administration and police can work much more fairly, much more judiciously, and much more independently.
Right. Satya Prakash, now with the new directions in place, how is it going to impact the selection process really of the DGPs, and what is the process going to be going forward?
Well, the immediate impact is going to have on Punjab and Haryana, where both the DGPs are on extension till 31st of this month. This is the second time they have got extension. Their term was expiring in September or October. They got it till December and then till January 31st. So for these 2 states immediately will get impacted because they will have to go through the UPSC route, and which will prepare a panel of 3 top officers. And accordingly, the state will have a chance, or they will get an opportunity to select from these 3. But what I hear is that another round they are going to get extension. This is what I've heard. But if that is the nature of the political class, and that's the way they are functioning, that's a sad commentary on the entire system. Because despite repeated orders from the Supreme Court, and that latest one being yesterday, if the political class is going to function like this happened in the case of Jammu and Kashmir also, because Mr. Dilbag Singh, he was appointed as acting DGP, and then they got extension or approval from the Supreme Court, and then finally he was appointed as a proper DGP. What is problematic is there was a culture, despite the Supreme Court's verdict in 2006, most of the states they were appointing interim DGPs, and they will give them extension without following, because if they appointed full-time DGPs.
We have an ad hoc DGP in Madhya Pradesh as well.
No,
now.
because most of the states, they were trying to circumvent the Supreme Court order like this, and that is why the Supreme Court in July last year passed an order that no appointment of interim DGP. Despite that this is happening, what they are doing is they would appoint, showing some urgency, and then they will come to the Supreme Court and try to present a kind of fait accompli. And Supreme Court, sometimes they give them times, because Jammu and Kashmir was a different case because of the security situation in the state. The Supreme Court had to agree. But then they created a precedent. They had to agree in Haryana, they had to agree in Punjab. But I am saying, if the Supreme Court goes on to agree or to these kind of manipulations by the state governments, then the entire verdict will go for a toss. Already we have 12 years down the line, much of the directions they have been violated. This is one of the key directions of the Supreme Court on appointment of DGPs and giving them a security of tenure. If this is also violated, and by most of the states, then it's very difficult to get the order implemented. And let's not forget that there was a committee appointed by the Supreme Court, Justice Thomas Committee, just to oversee the implementation of the order. So you pass an order, a detailed order, directions, then you appoint a committee to oversee the implementation. Then the states would appoint, enact laws violating most of the directions. So we are in circles and circles and we are reaching nowhere.
Right.
It's important that most of the directions, and particularly key directions 6 or 7, they should be followed in letter and spirit, and this practice of appointing interim DGPs must end.
All right. Closing comments now from all my guests, starting first with you, Mr. Malhotra. What's the best way forward?
Well, normally I have been saying that in executive matters, the Supreme Court should not intervene, and its power under 142 should not be utilized for giving direction in executive matters. But I think this is one such case where probably that kind of intervention was needed, and I think our constitutional framework were wise enough to give this kind of power to the Supreme Court. And some sense of discipline should be brought, more particularly. You see, DGP is head of the police state, and he has to ensure rule of law in the state. And unless his impartiality and independence is assured and tenure is assured, probably the kind of confidence which you are looking for in his police force will not be forthcoming. So to that extent, I think it's a welcome step. But only thing I expect is that Supreme Court should now decide this case finally. And so far as the final action of police reform is concerned, which has been pending for so long, I think this should be expedited, and executive should take action on that also as early as possible.
Mr. Tripathi?
I agree that normally the Supreme Court need not enter into the domain which is said to be belonging to executive, but here it is not really entering the domain of executive, but bringing the Public Service Commission to perform its constitutional role, which it was perhaps due to its reluctance or due to historical past or whatever, was not in a position to perform, and had limited its role only to selection at the entry level. So the Public Service Commission must be brought in to make all selections and make empanelments from which the government can make the choices. And it is true not only for police but also for civil service, and there is a parallel case, PIL, where TSR Subramaniam and 82 others, they had filed PIL. I am one of those petitioners. Unfortunately, Mr. Subramaniam passed away. There also the state governments have not been following the directions, and we are likely to file a review come follow-up petition. So it is a welcome step. I think the state governments should follow it, and they should not be petty-minded, and they should not look at personal relationship between the political executive and the police officers. They should look at the larger interests of society in the country, and the rule of law should prevail, for which a disciplined force, a uniform force must have a head in whom they place trust, and they also look up to for directions, etc., rather than going here and there for various things.
You know, Dr. Singh, the other panelists have already said that this is a step in the right direction, and this is something that is the need of the hour really at this point in time. Probably should have happened earlier. But as a former DGP, I want to know what next along with this?
The desperation with which the nation is looking at the Supreme Court with bated breath is faithful and immediate implementation of its own orders, and those who refuse to or fail to comply with it, contempt of court proceedings must be drawn against them. The cult of Ad hocism must end once and for all because it breeds mediocrity. India needs meritocracy, not mediocrity. And to that extent, I would say that the best man of the lot may be picked up to head a police force. He has the job of a father, mother and a guru. You cannot have any person. You should have the best man for that job.
All right, and Satya Prakash, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Well, the political class, I can understand their this control over the police force. I can understand why they don't want to let it go. But a time has come when the police force must be left completely independent and the political interference in their functioning must go. So political class must accept the new reality of India where the society is not in a position to accept the old norms, where the political class was in a position to misuse the police force for their own purposes. And there is an intervention by the civil society, and there is an intervention by the Supreme Court. So this new reality must be accepted by the political class, be it in any state. That's the new reality.
So that we move towards a better police force in the near future. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.